the marketing funnel, or like the YouTube thumbnail kind of thing. No one's gonna watch the video if they don't like the thumbnail, right? And to make it work in 10 years, you have to make it work right now. If right now doesn't work, then in 10 years it's not gonna work for sure. So you have to like what you see now. Hey Matt,
Hey Tim.
what you got for me?
So today I'd like to talk about a topic. Well, I mean, we briefly touched upon relationships,
Mhm.
very very briefly, and I think it's about time we have a conversation about relationships fully, and specifically about romantic relationships.
Yeah, there's
And
tons of stuff
recently,
to talk about.
yeah, I mean, it's about time, right? Recently, I listened to an episode of the Alex Hormozi podcast, The Game,
Yeah, I
and
love it. He's great.
it is great and is really full of interesting, I mean, of insights in general. And the way some of them feel like to me like they are a bit counter the usual wisdom. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
I
I don't
mean,
know if
that's
you've
kind of
seen.
like what I love about him. He's a little bit like Elon Musk in that sense, right? He kind of like takes apart what people say and like really like goes back to first principles and says like what actually is true here. Like what of our assumptions is actually true and what's bullshit.
Right. It's very pragmatic. I,
Yeah.
I, I love
I
it.
love it, yeah.
So yeah, I've been listening to all his episodes pretty much. But he's been doing the podcast for years, so I think I'll never reach the end. So and also the I use the Overcast app. There's no promotion here, but
Yeah, I was gonna say.
but I use it and it goes from like top to bottom, right? So from
Yeah.
latest episode. So I'm going back in time basically,
Yeah, I should
and
do the same. I mean, not back in time, but like listen to his entire
yeah, I mean,
series.
they're all kind of valuable. Sometimes when you do like that, you kind of hear the same topics repeat. But I think it's good. It's like a
Yeah,
book, you know. In a
yeah,
book, you get
yeah.
the main topics, and they're
Did you
like,
listen to his book, or did you read his book, or either way?
I know, but I wanted to start. Is my next in line. I'm finishing one, and then I'll start
Yeah,
the first of his two
yeah.
books. I
It's
think it's
probably super valuable for your business also. I mean,
yeah.
maybe you know everything, but he has a way of like, uh, he has a way of, I think, boiling it down to like the important things, which I really like.
Yeah, I mean, in the podcast, of course, he mentioned some of the principles of the books,
Yeah,
and yeah, they're very interesting. And again, like I've never heard an explanation of those topics the way he does. And
yeah.
you know,
He has a way of having very counterintuitive arguments but he explains them in a way that make a ton of sense to me at
right.
least.
Right. And also there's this wave of like thinking of, oh, business books are useless because you can't really teach business, and he's proving them wrong. Like
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think yeah. So I mean, very interesting. But then I stumble upon an episode which is really different from the others. I mean, he briefly mentions his relationship. He is married,
Yeah, he talks
and
about his wife all the time, which is
right,
super cute. Yeah,
he talks about her, and again, it's another take that's different from what you generally hear,
mhm.
and they work together, which is another interesting bit because
Yeah,
it's not easy to work, I think, with your partner,
yeah, for sure.
or could be easy. I don't know. I've never tried, but
Maybe it's kind of it's maybe it is kind of like the proof of his relationship advice is that he can make this work, because I think most people wouldn't be able to make this work.
yeah. Although there is one thing that not bothers me, but like that always I have a question mark when I see every time you see somebody like boasting about their like perfect relationship, perfect situation, anything perfect, and like pushing that narrative. I
Yeah.
always think like maybe temporarily it is, but nothing is perfect, and so like you know, I don't know.
I mean, I feel like he's being pretty honest in the episode. I mean, you sent the episode to me, so I did listen to it.
Mhm.
It feels like he is mentioning the negative things also, but like you never know. You never know what he doesn't
Yeah,
tell.
exactly, and he mentions that as well. I think there's a bit. So just to frame the topic here, he in the episode he talks about basically finding the one, finding
Yeah,
the person you can
yeah,
share your life with,
yeah,
your romantic partner, and it happens to be that for him he's also his business partner, which is again makes it even more interesting and complicated, I think, at the same time.
Do you know how long they've been married?
Not really,
Okay. I
but not
mean,
long, I think.
yeah. I mean, he's not super old, I guess, but yeah. I mean, if it
I
was
think he's
like
our
30 years,
age.
it would be
Maybe
different.
he's a couple of
Yeah,
years
he's
younger. Yeah,
maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably in the range. Yeah,
but like their success has been like pretty fast. So I think
yeah, for
it's been
sure.
less than 10 years.
It
Definitely.
is pretty impressive for sure. He's like 0 to 100, and
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and also the thing is, I was watching a few other podcasts like that talked about him a few years ago, and you see how people were like, "Is this guy legit? Like, is he like?"
yeah,
Because again, he's teaching how to make money. Every time you see that,
yeah.
you're like, "Is it
But
sketchy?"
yeah,
You know?
yeah, he has a way of he has a way of, because he's a salesperson also, right? Like you can tell he's a salesperson, but he has a way that seems a little sketchy in the beginning, but the proof's in the pudding, because like he does have a lot of really successful stories in his business life. So he's 35, by the
He's
way.
very transparent, and I
Yeah,
think that helps his brand for
yeah,
sure.
for sure. I think that's exactly his brand. Like the
Yeah,
you
he
know
tells his story like at this point, like given all the episodes I listened to, like I know his life story
yeah.
like from one
Yeah.
side
I
to the
mean,
other.
he's also like, he's super open about everything, and he's like a kind of like I don't give a fuck kind of guy, right? Because like
Yeah,
if you see his interviews, he's always in his like pajamas, wearing like
yeah,
this, this breathing thing on his nose. I think that he just
yeah,
it doesn't take off after getting up, or, or something. Yeah. So
yeah.
it's definitely his brand. Just like
Ye- yeah.
I'm just this way, and take it or leave it
Apparently
personality.
that's what he's working on, a new book on branding, so that he's
Yeah.
really like trying every is I like that's the other thing that reinforces his ideas, the fact that like he shows you in real life, like while he does it,
Yeah.
that it works. And I think all this is like very well organized. I think
Yeah.
his approach is very well organized, and for sure, it's proof that like many things that he says work. Now,
Mm.
that said, relationship is completely it's apart, right? It's a topic apart. And so in this episode he talks about that and his perspective on that, his ideas, right? The podcast is all about his ideas, and he always says, like take it or leave it, like whatever, this is what I
Yeah.
think. If it's useful for you, good, otherwise whatever. But it's all about documenting the journey, documenting the experience, wishing that somebody else done it before, so that like it would have made his life easier.
Yeah.
And it's definitely making like it's a good learning experience. And
Yeah.
so in the episode, like he talks about a lot of concepts that are quite interesting. And the feeling I had listening to it was like, okay, like I had a couple of aha moments where I was like, yeah, this thing, other people said it, but not with the same depth. Like other
Yeah.
people touched upon, like, that the one above all was the idea of you should find somebody that like you the way you are, right? This
Yeah, but
sentence,
when the thing is, when other people say it, it seems kind of like, it seems a little bit like spiritual. Just be who you are.
right?
But he the way he describes it is super pragmatic, and he explains why you should be exactly how you are, instead of just being woke, and just
Right.
be who you are, and full acceptance of everyone how they are. That's not really what he's saying.
Right, because that's the trap, right?
Yeah.
When somebody tell you like be who you are, like be authentic, fine, that's for sure. But like the trap is like going on the other way, completely the other way of the spectrum, which is uh you have like good sides and bad sides, you have things that you could improve, and like complete acceptance might bring you to like not taking care of the social hygiene. I don't
Yeah.
have a better term for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, I like that term.
So I think that's kind of a that's a trap there, and by him going in depth on like why and how and the mechanics of it, yes, sure, like it removes a bit of the poetry and the like the magic of like, oh, two people that meet and instantly hit it off, And yeah, but then again, I don't think it does. It's a way of approaching things. I think thinking about relationship in a practical way doesn't necessarily remove the magic. And the way, one bit that he mentions a couple of times there is that even if it does when you think about it rationally, but then in the moment when things happen, you don't really uh, remember that it was organized. I don't know if
Mhm.
maybe I was a bit rambling here, but the point, like he gives an example of the there are the love languages. I think we
Yeah, he
briefly,
mentioned about,
yeah.
yeah.
And so he mentions them, and the one of them was like, is the acts of service, like
Mhm.
doing something for the other person, or doing something that the other person really values, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And he mentions like his wife asking him to like pick up the trash and like, right.
yeah.
And and he says, I do it mostly because she likes that I do it, and because she thanks me for it every single time that I do it, or pretty much every single time, right?
Mhm.
And that thank you that I get from her, it's worth the trip with the trash, right? And so this small example, I think it is true that like it is organized, right? Like by her and he mentioned this manipulation aspect, like, yeah, it's manipulative, the fact that she thanks me every single time in order for me to do it, maybe, but then it doesn't matter because the effect of the thank you is still,
Yeah,
still happens.
I think what he says is that a manipulation is only negative if the intent is negative. But
Right.
if the intent is to help, then I mean, I think then he says like he doesn't call it manipulation but help.
Yeah, again, it's his take. I'm
Yeah.
not sold on it 100%, but I think like conceptually as an idea, but like it is true that like if you set things up in a way uh, on the day-to-day life experience, you might forget about the fact that like they're like less instinctual and more rational. But then again, like, can you really live your life? I don't want to get immediately philosophical here, but can you live your life fully instinctual? I don't think so, right? And especially when you behave with, like, when you have to do with people, like you interact with people and you live your life around people, you need to think about what you do, right? Like, because
Yeah.
there are others. There's your sphere of influence. There are like your life as an individual, but like a lot of the things you do have an impact on others. So if you just follow your instincts, many times you're gonna like cross other people's needs
Yeah.
in a way that you didn't think about, right?
Yeah, I think kind of the main point in this episode was that instead of finding a person and trying to make it work by compromising on a lot of things, you find a person that where the compromises don't seem like such a big deal because they already either like the things that make you, or the red flags that, or what would be red flags to other people, or they don't care about them, right?
Yeah.
And even if you speak different love languages, which he says, I think, is that if your partner has a love language that, even though it might not be yours, it doesn't bother you to use it to make your partner happy, then you should do that. So basically, find someone where the things you have to compromise on are not a big deal to compromise on to you. Because like if you find someone where you have to make big changes to your own personality to be able to make them happy, then that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think I think it's even less than that. The point is, potentially find somebody that you don't really have to compromise much to have a good baseline everyday life with, right? Like, already compromising, of course, in relationships you have to work to make them work,
Yeah.
and put effort, but like if your baseline default behavior with each other clicks and works without much effort, that's a fantastic foundation, because then, yes, you will have to compromise for some things. There's not a perfect match ever, but then that little, that's going to be a little effort. You don't have to
Yeah.
do a huge effort. So I agree. Like, I think that that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that he, he says it well with the list of priorities, because like,
Mm.
I mean, that's like also a thing in business, right? It's a thing in relationships, but also in business. And what is interesting about his approach is that he treats relationships like, yeah, like he treats the business. Um, that he says you should get your priorities straight, and if anyone says everything is a priority, which you hear so much in business, right? If you're in a corporate
Yeah.
setting, you say like, what's the
Yeah.
priority? Everything is a priority. That doesn't make any sense, because you can't by definition have everything be a priority. Um,
Which is interesting. Like, I was reading a business book a few months ago, and one interesting bit there was this idea of seasons of, like, you take a sort of I mean, they frame them as challenges, but the idea was like, you take a period of time and you decide, okay, this is going to be our priority for this period of time, and then next period of time another priority,
yeah,
and you make it like it's sort of like a game, right, within the business environment, where everybody pushes towards that priority, and then you switch priority.
yeah,
And because there are so many priorities, you have to choose one at a time, and then you go back to you change it. And that makes sense. I think it can be applied. But then the bigger point is, this is very practical, right? Like, it's very much like, okay, let me decide. Like, what he's saying is, if, taking on what you just said, right? Like, decide what are your, like, top priorities. Like, rank your priorities in a way, and then very logically decide, okay, this person, if my top priority is this, and the person matches this, I mean, meaning like, this thing works for me, then if the second or the third are not being met, but the first it is, uh, like, the relationship can continue. Like, he talks about non-negotiable or
yeah,
negotiable priorities. And that's an effort already, because if I have three priorities and one is met and the second is met and the third is not, still they are priorities. And so it might impact a part of your relationship with the person, because that thing is not the way you want. um, and but it's not enough for you to leave. He mentions that, and it makes a lot of sense. But then it's very, very practical. And sometimes I wonder, like, going back to the idea of, like, um, can we reduce relationships to such a like fully practical extent? Not super sold on that. Like, yeah, there is a, like, that's a highest percentage makes sense. Like, I would say this is a recipe for a good solid relationship, for
hmm
sure.
hmm
I agree with him, because you could say life is made of a lot of instances, a lot of days and instances, day-to-day instances, where if things work well, the feeling of, like, when things work well, you don't think about them. They're not a bothering. They're not
yeah,
a, like, a source of stress or anxiety. So they just flow, right?
yeah,
And and so that's true. Like, that makes life easier. So, like, a solid relationship makes life easier. But then there is a, in a pyramid, which you could say, like, exist or not, in our, like, fulfilling journey. Like, in a pyramid, you then look for something else.
yeah,
And does it make sense? And, like, because a solid relationship that works makes life easier, and you focus on, and again, like, it's not that you don't focus on a relationship, but you don't even notice that you do the things that make it work
hmm
perfect. It's like the experience of flow, right? Like, you're
yeah,
in it, things flow, they work. You don't have, like, friction, right? Because you notice when there's friction. When there's not friction, things go, and you don't even realize, and you do
yeah,
the things and everything. But then there's the next level. Okay, where do I focus? Like, if that part works, then I focus on other areas of my life. Great. And in fact, solid relationship make you improve on other areas, right? Because that works, and that's kind of like also a boost of your mood, of your initiatives, energy, right? If you are in with a partner, like, that sustains you, and, like, in a relationship that works, you probably do better in other areas of your life.
hmm
But then besides the other areas of your life, the idea is like, okay, maybe you need a sort of like it gets into the vision thing, right? Like, what's the vision of my, like, you start asking yourself, it's the same thing as like the pyramid of needs, right? The
Hmm.
Maslow pyramid. You need survival, you
You
need to be
need
able,
survival, yeah.
right, you need to be able to survive, you need to be able to like provide food, you need to yourself, and then safety, right? And then you start thinking about bigger things, right? And
Hmm.
so I think also there the and it's interesting because there are a lot of relationships out there that don't even meet these needs, right? This baseline of like, okay, the relationship works. But my point is like, beyond that, there's another aspect, and he kind of like talks about it, which is the need that they both have. Like, he talks about his relationship and the fact that they both expect the best out of themselves, and they
Hmm.
expect the best out of each other, right? And this kind of like gets into the vision, common shared vision, which is another like 50%, I think, of like an amazing relationship. Like, having like the day-to-day baseline of like, I meet your needs, you meet my needs,
Hmm.
right? And then projection, future projection of like, where do we want to go? Okay, this is like the day to day. The day to day works. We're stable. We're solid. We understand each other. We meet our needs. But then, where do we want to go? And if the where do we want to go doesn't match, the relationship still doesn't have a long life. That's my view, at least.
Yeah, but I think he kind of says that, right? He says, if I mean, kind of his the premise is that if the person likes you for these core character traits that you have, and the other ones that are red flags to other people don't bother them, but the way you want to grow is exactly these traits that they appreciate, you can only get better for them. But if the expectation in the relationship is, okay, I'm making some compromises here, this thing I don't like that is really important to me, this thing I don't like that is really important to me, but if the trajectory of growth of that person is more into the direction of what I don't like, then the future doesn't look good. But if the direction of growth is into the direction of what I like about them, then that's great. You know?
Yeah,
If,
yeah. But then there's where you put that kind of like um those traits into action. Meaning, like, let me try and give a practical example here. So let's say that, I mean, what he mentioned, again, taking his example to not take ours, the idea is like, they have a very strong work ethic, both of them, right? So he says, and that's one thing that they appreciate of each other. Like, they set very high standards for each other, for themselves first, and then for each other's. And then the point is that they also seem to have a shared vision of like the life they want to build
mhm.
together, right? But then you could have the traits, and I mean, you could be in a relationship with a person and like share these like traits and like this kind of like match. But then I want to um I don't know, like become an experienced surfer, and
Yeah,
you instead want to climb the corporate ladder. Like, those two things are very, like, it's a cliche, but like they're very far from each other
yeah.
generally, right? And so even though the traits are there, and you kind of like match on that front, and you're great together and you're good with each other, but then you have life vision, life ambitions that are different like in terms of like what the what, not the how, right?
Hmm.
And then that still wouldn't make it work that well, because you want to have like completely different lifestyles in a way. Does it make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah. I guess what you're saying is that you don't know how the person will change anyway when you meet them. But I think the way he says it is that you should be as honest as possible when you meet, so that the cards are on the table. Like, this is who I am. This is where I want to go. If you're cool with the direction I'm going, then let's go for it. If not, then let's move on. Kind of approach. But I
Yeah.
don't know if your critique is the fault is what I'm about to say. But it sounds like you're saying you never know what's gonna happen to your goals in the future because it might change, right?
That's another aspect that I wasn't even considering. Yes. Yeah, that's another aspect.
So
But
then maybe
then,
maybe I don't understand, because like if we meet, let's say we have our first date or third date or whatever, and I say, "Oh, I really want to become a professional surfer," and the other person says, "Well, I want to, stay here and create a company," then you already know it's not a match, right? And he says, "Put the cards on the table."
yeah, I mean, I think there are the three levels here. One is like personality traits, which are before the what you want to do with them, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
the strong work ethic is can be applied on many things,
Hmm.
right? And so I think the initial match, and the baseline that I was mentioning is like, okay, are we a good fit in terms of like our personalities and the
Yeah, but
way
I
we.
think I mean, at least this is the way I understood it,
Mm.
is that he says like put the cards fully on the table, even your direction and goals and everything. That's what it sounds like to me.
Right, but then it connects to your point, which is, the, let me ask you a question. Like your trajectory so far in your life, like how many
Hmm.
times did you change your mind on what you wanted to do with your skills, your personality,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I don't know if I'm the best example because I
But I
changed my
think
mind.
nobody like.
I mean, I
I
think
think
there's
you
people that
are.
are much more stable in what they want than me. Like, I think I change my career once a year completely, almost. So, I don't know. I think I'm not the
But
best
change
example.
your career in terms of like, do you think? I mean, do you think you changed drastically your direction? Because one thing is that you change job or like the area you focus on, but another thing is that you change your lifestyle, right? I don't think you change your lifestyle so much.
I mean,
Do you
define
think?
lifestyle.
It's it's the collection of routines and habits and yeah, pretty much.
I mean,
Uh,
I think definitely it changes more than for other people, but
mm,
it's gradual, right? But I'm definitely not the same person I was 5 years ago in many ways. Like, I have different priorities now than I had 5 years ago, for sure.
right.
Probably
And
like
so,
I'm probably closer to my 5 year ago self than to another person, but still.
yeah, so that's an aspect
Also, my
because,
requirements in a partner now are have changed compared to 5 years ago, for sure. Also,
but that's because the more you go on, the more you experience, and the more you realize what you don't want.
yeah, I think it's also that's actually a really good point, and I don't know if this is getting off what you wanted to say, but two things he says is, or that I think he's missing, is that one thing that can happen is that there are certain things that you realize you need from a partner that you might not know yet, and you can't always assume full knowledge of everything at all times. As you said yourself, if life's good and you're just coasting,
Yeah,
then maybe the partner is great, but how would they react in a really stressful situation? Like, you might not know yet, right? What happens if suddenly you're super poor? You don't know, you've never been in that situation with that person before, so it's hard to predict how they will react. Maybe they're the perfect partner in the good times, but maybe they're a terrible partner in the bad times, right? So I think this is maybe a little naive on in on from his
yeah,
standpoint. But like the other thing, he does kind of mention it a little bit, right? Because he says, I really like this thing that he says his father said, which is,
yeah.
what was it? I'm super bad at quoting
I
people.
think if you have a type, you don't have a wife, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that.
Mm,
Because
yeah.
like, uh, yeah, exactly. So
If you
you,
keep dating your type, it means that it's not really your type. Otherwise, you would have a wife
yeah, kind of
to
like
this
that.
point.
You
Yeah,
keep going for the same traits, and it keeps not working out.
yeah.
Because if that was really your type, you would be married to them. Uh,
Which is, it opens up a very other interesting aspect, which is the ideal that we have in our mind. That's
yeah,
fascinating to me. Like every one of us, I think, to some extent, some more, other less, but have an ideal type
yeah,
or a few ideal types, like kind of like a character in mind, like a specific, like if we were from a movie, right?
yeah, yeah,
And then we try to like find, and of course the ideal as an ideal, it's never wrong, it's always perfect, always the right thing at the right time, and it's not something real, right? So every time life in reality, like it doesn't really live up to that standard, of
mhm,
course, but that's not a problem. You realize that that's an ideal, it's not life. But like still, the problem, it keeps open the question of like, is there more, is there something slightly better, can I find a person that's like a little bit closer to my never achievable ideal of
Yeah.
a relation, which is really bad.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly. And what he says is kind of like you should, for dating in particular, branch out more, and because you might discover things that are important to you that you didn't know before by dating other types of people that you wouldn't even have considered dating. So you go out with people from different cultural backgrounds, different ethnicities, people that don't match your visual type, that don't match your supposed personality type, just to discover things that you didn't even know you cared about because you've never seen them in a person.
that's a good side. The other face of it, I think, is the more experiences you have, the more you have point of reference, and the
Yeah, yeah,
more
I know.
you
That's
tend to
right.
compare
The grass is
your,
always greener symptoms.
right. You're like, oh, but that thing was like that, and
Yeah,
now it's not. And
I have that problem with everything. I also have that problem with places I live because I think
okay.
just like you, we moved a lot. And whenever I'm in a new city, I'm like, oh, I wish it was like in this other city where I liked it much more.
Yeah.
I mean, this happens to me all the time. Oh my god, why are the stores closed at this time here? Like, I hate this. I hate this place. And
Yeah.
yeah, you forget about the bad things from the other places for sure. Do you know there's this? This is kind of a little bit off the track, but I watched this Veritasium episode the other day on making binary decisions, and well, the episode was actually on the number 37 and why
Hmm.
in dating and other binary decisions, as in, sequential binary decisions, like should I take this or should I not take it, and then go to the next one, right? So
Hmm.
like looking at apartments is one of those things. Like you look at them and then you haven't seen that many places yet, so you should look at more places and not accept the first thing you see. And dating is the same, right? If you accept that dating is like a sequential binary decision process. And you know what I mean? So like you look at an
Yeah.
apartment, you're like, okay, this looks kind of fine, but maybe there's better because I
Although
haven't
my
seen so many.
experience is when you look at apartment, like the first you see journey is the one you should take because it's always the best, and then you have to wait months. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's
No, but like I mean, just the point I wanted to make is that
yeah.
it turns out if you're in a process like this, you should always look at 37 apartments or
Okay.
partners, 37 in a row, and reject them all, and then you should take the best so far. And that's mathematically proven to be the best strategy.
So the best so far is the best of the 37 you
No, no.
you
So you always look at 37 and say no to all of them. The first 37 you always say no.
okay.
And after 37 you take the best so far. And that's apparently the optimal strategy. And for dating and for
Because
looking at
that means that
apartments.
you
You have
learn.
yeah, you have enough information,
Mm.
but you minimize the regret because yeah, exactly.
So the next best after 37, you said no. Basically,
Exactly.
like
Is
it
the
should
one you
be
should take.
better than those 37, basically.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
it could be that it could be that number 6 was the best ever, but you
What
never
a
find it again.
tough life, though, man. Like
Yeah.
37 are is like apply to anything. Like it takes ages.
Yeah, I
Like
guess you have to adjust a little bit for how likely is it that you can
I
go through
mean,
37.
the only thing is going on Skyscanner and checking 37 cities. Maybe that's easier, but like where to travel. But everything else like takes
Yeah,
ages. Like
yeah, yeah, for sure. Anyway,
yeah, but
it's just an interesting piece of information that I saw the other day. But that's kind of the point, right? If you don't branch out at all, you don't have any comparisons. But if you go too far, that's what you said, right? You have this grass is always greener thing where you have seen too many options and then you always see the shortcomings because you've seen it better somewhere else.
then I have I don't know if this is even, but potentially it's kind of like a trick in those situations where you're like, what should I do? I have a friend that, like a close friend, that always like has this saying which I really like, which is, if you're in doubt, don't do. Like if you're in doubt, don't choose, don't do anything. No action is better than action when you're in
I
doubt.
actually fully disagree with that. I think like this is actually I think
But
I couldn't
let me get
disagree
to
more.
what I
Yeah,
add
okay.
on top of
Okay,
it
okay.
to try and explain, because I think that's kind of like, that could be like, when you have those short quotes, you're like, there's so
Yeah,
many
it depends
objections to
on the
that.
context. Yeah.
But then the point is, the way I look at it is, don't act for now. I would add that, because the point is, those things that really matter to you, they haunt you. Like the moment, like when you're undecided, if you don't act and you take your time, really should be changed into like take your time, think through, because the immediate action is never right. Although sometimes, like, if let's put it like this, if the action you take doesn't have crazy consequences, like deep consequences, better to take quick action. Like on small decisions, quick action is the best, because
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
that
worth
would be my
waiting.
main caveat. Yeah, exactly. If it's not a big deal, do it right now because
Right.
it's just going to create
Mental
mental
takes mental
mental.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when you, yeah, anyway, I don't want to go in a tangent. I will think. But then the point is, yes, the moment you, like, it's a big question, like it's a big choice that you have to make. Don't make the choice yet. Think through. It will haunt you, the fact that, like, one of the two options, if it's something like, valuable for you, it will come back. It will, meaning like it will resurface in your mind. You will think about it again and again and again. And that to me is the best way to choose. Is like, you have the two options. If don't make a choice, wait, and let your mind work for you and resurface the one of the two that, like, you really need to choose.
Yeah,
Because, does it make sense?
not sure I subscribe. I think I understand, but I'm not sure I subscribe because I think sometimes having these options boil in your mind just like makes you go crazy for a long time. There's so many things where just postpone decisions over
But
and
that's
over and
but that's okay. But then that, I see what you're saying. But that's, I think, a different way of looking at it. Is like, keep the options open. No, I'm saying don't choose. Like take the apartment thing. I don't know. We were
Mhm.
talking about that. Right?
Okay.
So you have the problem with that is that there's a time, there's a risk, and
Yeah,
that's the problem
yeah,
with a lot of things in life right now, because life gets faster and faster.
yeah.
Many times you lose the window of opportunity on things.
Exactly.
But fortunately, it's not really like that for everything, right? And even and I think it's like the, um today is the day of comparisons. It's like the, when you go on Booking, and I don't know why I'm thinking about travel website, but you go on Booking, and you have this thing like, five people just like rented in the city you want to go to, like,
Yeah,
hurry up.
yeah.
That's fake. Meaning, like, maybe it happened, but it's like, it's false sense of scarcity, because you actually.
Yeah, for sure. But the same as you know that there's an opportunity cost when you wait with decisions, right? So this is true for dating. It is true for booking hotels, and it's true for the stock market also. Because
But there is abundance out there, and you thinking that that's the choice of your life makes it makes you decide wrongly, I think. I don't
yeah,
know,
I
it's a
think
strong idea,
I
but
think there's two sides to this. I think, like, first of all, I think it lends itself to a procrastination lifestyle, and I have this problem a lot because, like, I have a really hard time making certain decisions, and travel is one of those things where I'm like, oh, should I
mm.
go there? Should I go there? And there's always like conflicting interests, and then I end up booking everything in the last minute always, and it's always super expensive. And sometimes just deciding for anything will take off so much pressure, and you're just like, okay, I committed to it, and now let's deal with it. And I think
Okay,
actually,
but let's unwrap that, because it's very interesting. But it's, so the apartment choice, like, where do I have to, like, let's say renting an apartment in a city. You get to a city and you have to rent an apartment. Okay, that's
Mhm,
one scenario. The other scenario is, where do I want to go for holidays?
mhm,
There's a difference there. Meaning, the where do I want to go for holidays is like, it's the paradox of, like, choice paralysis. You have
mhm.
so many opportunities that
Yes.
you don't know. But the way out of it is act sequentially, meaning, like, I mean, for people like us on that overthink that, and like, I mean, there are so many other, like, I want to do it all at the same time. The point there is, like, be patient on, like, you're gonna get there. Just do one at a time, right? Potentially, if you make a list of the places you want to go to, and you rank them, and you're like, okay, I want to go to all these places, but I can't in the same time go to all these. And if I don't act like sequential, I'll never get through it
I
in
mean,
a
it
in a
is it is in a way a very very good dating metaphor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true, true. And so that's a way out of the paradox of choice. Like, paradox of choice strategy, I think, is like, make a list, and especially because they're non-exclusive, right? Like, the point is, like, you can go for a trip now here, tomorrow there, right?
Yeah, but
It's not
that's
that.
also why the risk of choosing wrong is not so large for the vacation. I mean, unless you have money for one trip, and I think we
Right.
always have to look at, like, what is the opportunity cost? Because if you go to Greece now and you really should have gone to Turkey, then it's not a big deal. You can just go next time.
Honestly, I hate opportunity cost because it's like it for us is really freezing, meaning like it's paralyzing
Yeah.
the way we act for people like us, because I don't think it matters. Yes, you could have done like a ton of other things. It's like when in stock market
Yeah, but
thinking
that's what
about.
I'm saying for Turkey. Like if you decide between Turkey and Greece, just, it's not going to be that much worse to go to Greece, even though like Turkey would have been better. It's like what did you lose? Not much. You lost some time and some money, but like
But
I'm sure
then
it's still like a
in
okay
Greece
trip.
there could be a storm the days you are in Turkey, full
Of course.
sun.
But then the worst thing that happens is that you had a bad vacation, which is not it's
Yeah.
not the worst. It's not the worst thing that can happen to you. But like there's other decisions like the apartment where you might be on the street if you don't act quickly. You might be without an apartment, which sucks much more than not having the perfect vacation, or like choosing a life partner.
But then, okay, that thing on the apartment, there's a caveat there, because if you're at that stage, you take whatever you need temporarily in with the most flexibility to then make a better decision. You don't rush into like getting into like a yearly lease
I
if
know,
you
but that's
right.
the whole point, and this is how it's more like a relationship, because the expectation is that you're gonna be with this choice for a long ass time, right? So even if it's your partner for life, it's actually, I mean, arguably it's easier to change your partners in today's society, at least in an urban environment, but which has negative consequences as well, because you could argue that marriage was much easier when you basically married the first person you met. Back in the day when you had sex with one
Yeah, but
person
that
your
but
entire
that
life.
I don't buy into that either, because by the way, that goes against the concept of Hormozy, which is be practical. Like he's if we boil it down, like it's go to a person, list all the negatives that you have, and like see how they react, and
Yeah,
then if they react well, whatever, that's not that negative, and
it can
then
only
they
get
list
better. Yeah,
right, and they list their negative, and you're like, oh fine, then you're good to go. And then the other point on the opposite, what he says, which is interesting, it was the idea of ask your partner, or potential partner, like the partner has to be partner, because you have to know each other
yeah,
enough. What's their ideal day with you? Like,
yeah,
what do you have to do to make
yeah,
their day amazing?
yeah.
And then if you see yourself doing these things, or
Super
part
easily. Yeah,
mostly, then great.
yeah,
If for you it's hell to do that,
yeah.
then it's already a no. But then, okay, that's very practical, but that's the opposite of like you get picked by somebody else, a person to stay with, and then you have to make it work. Which I'm not saying is it. I don't think one could argue in that scenario, since you don't have another choice, both of you don't have another choice. Maybe some of the reasons why relationships fall apart, right, like these days, vanish, because a good portion, a good percentage of like the reason why they fall apart is because of this potential opportunity. Other
Exactly. That's exactly. Don't you remember this TED talk? This went super viral like years ago about uh, the study where they gave the participant the option to change their mind about something, and they were like on average much less happy than the ones where they were forced to stick to their choice. Do you
yeah,
remember that?
yeah,
I think this is such a great study, because I think it's so true. We live in a time, especially our generation. I think we live in a time where we're kind of flooded with so many options, and the internet makes it worse, and that's a totally different discussion still, but we have so many options, or we have the perception of so many options, that we're always unhappy with what we have, because we always compare it to everything. There's this nice Wait But Why article also, why Generation Y is so unhappy, because we're the first generation that has so many options. We always compare ourselves to other people. So we always look at this other relationship. We always look at the other woman if we're in a relationship. We're like, oh my God, they have this, this, this. And I wish I had this, this, this. And it makes us always question what we have. Right.
yeah, exactly. That's the point. Because why, of course, is the letter Y, but I always look at it like why as the why question mark. Why this? Why that? Because the thing is, we question like it's we're not the first generation to do that. They've been like every
Yeah, no, I think it's just we're the first generation where has gotten so out of control because probably
right,
because of
because
the internet also. Yeah.
there's that we question like a lot of a lot of things that in the past were not questioned. We're like, okay, this is the way it is,
Yeah,
right?
you
Like,
you do this job because your dad did it. You're
right,
gonna marry
right.
this woman because she lives across
That's
the.
how
Yeah,
things work.
exactly.
and
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 it's just the way it is. Yeah.
I think it's progress though, because question it's not, again, there were generations in the past that question things, right? But then I think it's progress because not accepting status quo of like how things are. It's the way curiosity. I don't know how to say this word ever.
Curiosity. Yeah, it's a difficult
Curiosity
word.
is like the way to knowledge, truth, and potentially like getting better on things. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're optimizing for. Because I mean, I
Yeah.
guess you would have to that's the whole happiness question again. We don't even know if happiness is what you should optimize for.
Yeah.
But I think if you minimize if you don't have a lot of choices, you minimize regret. It's like a menu at the restaurant. I actually prefer menus where there's only like 5 items because like
Yeah,
if
but
there's like a
then
million items, yeah.
minimizing regret, is this the strategy for life? Like, is it like, or going for like the big leap, like going for the like, right? It's like it's like the person that like has a new car and like goes super slow because it doesn't want to bump the car into anything, right? That's minimizing regret. But that's not like, oh, I have a new car, let me like try it out properly, right?
Yeah,
uh
yeah. I mean, I see exactly what you're saying. The question is really, is it what's what's worse, spending the rest of your life with a partner that's only 50% compatible, or potentially finding someone who's 95% compatible but also a 90% chance you're going to die alone because you find no one because you're so picky.
but then I go against that, and I'm not sure I'm practically in my life doing that, but like theoretically I would say that's like living a bit in fear, because there's abundance, and potentially
I
you
mean,
can
that's always
find.
the question, is there abundance? Because for apartment hunting, I don't know if I would agree.
But there's always a way out, like for apartment hunting. Okay, let's take the example of apartment hunting. Like you can, but one second, I want to stay on the relationship example,
Yeah,
right?
either way,
let's
yeah.
Yeah, let's say that you find yourself, because things change, potentially you find yourself in a relationship that's not what you signed up for. Okay. And nowadays the stigma is not the same that it was in the past. You can break up, and you can find another partner. Now the question is this gonna like affect your life? Yes. Like, depending on when that happens, if you have a family, if you don't have a family, like there's a lot of like variables there, but like this is gonna affect your life. But I think it's gonna affect your life more if you don't do it when you feel like you have to do it. Does it make sense? Like living in a status of like I should do something and I don't do it because I might end up alone. It's a risky business. Like it's a situation where like you don't live to your full potential. And the problem I see is that it's very hard to distinguish living to your full potential to the endless stream of choices and shiny things out there which are not real, and they distract you because they make you think that that's living to your full potential, right? Like um, more and more of everything, right?
Hmm.
Novelty, accumulation, like those things, right? Which it could be of things, of experiences, right? But then so quantity and novelty, I think those are the biggest problems on like a fulfilling life, because they distract you from your like your course of action, right?
Hmm.
Because there's always something better, something new. And and, and I think that that's the hardest distinction, like distinguishing like between it's something that I really feel like I want to do, or it's something that looks good, sounds good, maybe I should do it, uh, they unfortunately the effect that they have on you, physiological, psychological, and physiological, are very similar. I think initially, right? Does it make sense? That's
Yeah,
why I
I mean,
think
but also
waiting.
sometimes you don't know before you try. It's kind of like what Hormozi says about dating other types of people. Sometimes you don't know what you want before you try it.
But that's very risky. It's a risky. I mean, yes, it's a risky road
I
though,
mean,
because you
you
could.
just said you shouldn't live in fear and just try things out.
Right, but my take, it's a good point, but my take on it is like, wait until it's stronger than you to do it. Does it make sense? Like,
Not
don't
sure.
jump on the first idea. Let it season, and without thinking about, because if you actively think about it, you like feed it. You know, when you have a thought, like, and you keep thinking about it, you feed that thought, you feed the emotions related to the thought, right? But if you don't actively think about it, but like, uh, it's
Let
important
it
for you, it
ferment.
will surface again. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I kind of get it, but I mean, again, I think we have to talk about opportunity cost because sometimes, I mean, it depends on where you are and everything. But I mean, for dating or for apartments or whatever, sometimes the first place you saw or the first person you saw was the best option, and you can never get it again because now it's taken by someone else, which is the same in dating and in apartment hunting. So I think there's two things. Like
But
one is
then
the
you were not
opportunity.
ready for it, because otherwise you would.
I guess, but if there's no other place, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, but is it a real scenario that you would consider, p- like a possibility, like of a scenario in real life? Like, there's no other option. I don't like. I completely follow your point on, like, let's take the apartment example. You see an apartment is like perfect, and you're like, but gosh, this is the first one I see.
Hmm.
Maybe there are others, right? You
Yeah.
have the thought, like, maybe there are other apartments, and so you're like, let me wait. And of course, window of opportunity closes, somebody else gets that apartment, and you're
Hmm.
like, gosh, I should have.
Yeah.
And then you go on and you see 10 other apartments, and you're like, they are nothing compared to that one.
Yeah.
But and then you start like losing, you don't trust the fact that, like, your job, it could have a ripple effect psychological, like, I should, whatever. So the point is, at some point you see one that is like, okay, that's good enough, and what do? uh you don't take it,
Yeah,
because it's
because
not that
you
one,
compare to that first one that was amazing,
right?
right?
And it was good enough, and you don't take it.
Yeah.
But then you have to accept that. I think the point there, and that's one thing that I am thinking lately. Like, in some areas of your life, you have to accept that things are not the most optimal, are not going to be the most optimal that the way that you thought you would end up in. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't have the best of everything,
Hmm.
and striving for that is good to the extent where you don't really get too much attached to, like, the outcome of, like, getting it right. Like,
Hmm.
pushing for best, for optimal, great. Getting attached to that, no. But then
But
it
then
goes back to priorities.
why not take the first one? This is kind of like my question. You why wouldn't you take the first one? Because then maybe it wasn't the best, but you said like you shouldn't always go for the best, and so who cares?
The
Then just
reason
take
why
it.
you don't take the first one is because you didn't have the experience to understand that you had to take it. Like, because let's say that you said, like, moving across cities, right? Like, one day in a city, like one year in a city, another year in a city. The first time you look for an apartment, you don't know this. People tell you, and you're like, whatever, it's not gonna be my situation, right? Like, you dismiss it because you haven't experienced it yourself. So this happens to you. The next time you're gonna, and then you end up in another apartment, whatever, then you change your city, and the next time, like, so it starts again, this search. Now you remember what happened the other time, and you're gonna get the first one because you have the experience. So I think the point is, um it is what it is.
Great. Maybe that should be the name of the episode. Hey guys, it is what it is. Do whatever the fuck you want.
No, but that's like, you go for go for your best, but then it goes really back to priorities. How much effort and energy do you like? Because
But
a lot of
that's
things.
the whole point because apartment hunting, in the same way as partner hunting, right? Or but let's say apartment
Yeah.
hunting, It's such a drain. I mean, I hate it. I don't, maybe some people like it, but I think apartment hunting is such a drain. And sometimes you just wish you had taken the first place, because then you're done with it. Was it worth the effort? There's like the increased happiness you get from, like, I don't even know, like this balcony, or the, or
Mm.
maybe it's, the bathroom is a little bit bigger or whatever. Is it worth the 1 year of looking and going through all the appointments, and I don't know.
That is totally subjective, and it's really like, for me, like taking like a personal example, like I don't buy into the idea. Like people say, when you get something that you really like strive for, like that you really wanted, then suddenly, very, very, very soon, it loses that. Like you lose interest in it. I don't agree. I think those things that are really a priority for you, and you work a lot towards them, once you get them, they give you a combination of like sense of calm, like a deeper sense of calm because you reached like an important goal of yours,
Hmm.
and they, in a like, I can put it like, known, in a passive way, they give you kind of like a sense of happiness. Like for apartments, for me, like with apartments, for me, it's kind of like that. Like I tend to waste a ton of energy on apartments,
Yeah,
and like apartment hunting in general, and like in the cities I lived, like I spent months looking for the right place, and
I
maybe I
remember.
had to live there for like 2 years or less.
Yeah.
But then I wanted, because then once I get it, like on it, it's such a day to day, like it's part of your daily experience, the place you live, right? And for me, it's part of my priorities, and so it's attached to a lot of things, that I think about myself. I don't know, it's
I
that
mean,
I think about
this
myself.
is exactly like a relationship. It is an important decision, but in the same vein, if you had taken the first place, let's say, back in New York, I remember you were looking for a long time.
Mhm.
Like, if you had taken the first place, you wouldn't even have any comparison to know it's not the best place, because you can't compare it to anything. So you just be okay with it. And
No, but
I lived in pretty terrible places in New York, and I was okay with it, because, like, actually it took away so much pressure from looking.
yeah, but I think we have different priorities on that regard, and I think it's not true for me because it's not a comparison problem. Like it's the way I experience it myself. It's not like, oh, the grass of the neighbor is greener. No, it's, yeah, of course. If I go to like a friend house and they have an apartment that like I would love to live in compared to mine, then I might temporarily. But then I don't buy into those things anymore. Like you, that's why the wait time is it's becoming more and more important in any decision I make, because also, sometimes you have like that spark of like, i I want this, or I need this, or, and then you wait and it vanishes, right?
Yeah,
Many
yeah, no,
many
for sure. That's kind of the
Mm.
Tao thing, right? Like, sometimes the
Yeah,
problems will solve themselves, and I totally
right.
get that. But also, I think, aside from the psychological thing, where you take the first thing, be it apartment or partner or whatever, and you don't even have anything to compare it with, so you're okay with it. But the next thing is that if you move, let's take the apartment thing, but I think for partner it's the same thing. Some things you don't know from your first visit. Some things you won't know. For example, this place I'm in, uh, there's some issues with it that I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't taken it, and the other way around, because there's just some things you can't know before. Like,
Yeah,
you can't know before that every Thursday your neighbor is having a loud, like a huge party, because you didn't visit the apartment on a Thursday, right?
sure.
So there's things you can't know without taking the apartment. And I think you can spend a year
Yeah,
and
but there
then,
are a ton of things that because
sure,
you
sure,
see,
sure.
right?
But, like, if you know that there's certain things you can't figure out on the first date, or during the time you go to the open house or whatever, you must, some certain experiences you have to make being when having already committed to that person or apartment, right? Some things you won't figure out
I
before
don't
you.
know why we're connecting apartments to
I mean,
people,
because
but it's fun. No, I
it's
mean,
similar. I think it's super similar. It's an important life decision where you're gonna live, and it's an important life decision how to, which partner to use to take as a partner. And it's like, actually, the selection process is super similar, because you sequentially looking at things like
Mm-hmm.
persons or places, and you have
Yeah,
to
it is.
make you
Yeah,
have to make
similar.
a decision based on incomplete knowledge, right? You have like a first date, or you visit the apartment.
Yeah, and
You
things
ne-
change. Like the
exactly,
restaurant, they open a
exactly.
restaurant below, and then you did. Yeah, for
Exactly.
sure.
And then that's the same thing for a relationship. Like you can't, and actually Alex Hormozi makes the same, just to get the curve here and like go back to the original
Hmm.
point
Hmm.
of this. He makes this comparison also, right? He says like if you're showing a house to someone, you should talk about the worst things first. Because like if you find a person that doesn't care about the worst things, then that's the perfect match, and both parties are gonna get a steal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
No,
that's
that I agree with.
yeah,
Okay, that I agree with. But then it goes back to it's a priority thing. Meaning, and I think this you see it like with the people we know. Like some people um, have relationship as a priority in their life. Some have not.
exactly.
And you could say, how can it? How can that be? Like relationship should be a priority for everybody, and I kind of agree. But then I think the way to describe it is a bit more like they don't require like priority goes with expectations in a way. If something is a priority, it means you expect a lot of different things or some very specific things, right?
Hmm.
Do we agree? Like if something is not a priority, whatever way it is, you'll be fine with it. Or like
Yeah,
the lower it is in the priority list, the lower you care, the less you care about how it is, the thing, the
sure. Yeah,
experience,
that's
right?
kind of the
So
definition. Yeah.
so priority goes with expectation. So the thing is, and it's funny because he mentions in the podcast, he mentions how I think it was Charlie Munger that said, or Warren Buffett, I don't remember, that said
No,
the
I think
best
it was
thing
Bill Gates, wasn't it? Bill Gates.
I don't know then, but no, I don't think it was big.
Anyway,
So it was saying like the thing I look for in a relationship, in a romantic relationship, is like low
yeah,
expectation.
yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, it should be low expectations in the things that you don't care about, right? If they expect something from you in an
Exactly.
area,
I don't like.
exactly, yeah,
I don't like that much because low expectation overall. And he mentions it is like, okay, I don't expect
yeah. I
anything
mean,
from you.
or high expectations in the areas that are easy to fulfill for you,
Right.
right?
So that's better.
If like,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, this is what he says. He just doesn't say it
Yeah.
directly,
Yeah.
but he says like, his wife Layla, right? She really wants someone who's like super goal oriented and wants to get very wealthy and so on. Then perfect. That's exactly what I want,
It's
right?
very high expectation on the same things.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
So then if expectations are high and priority is high, and then there's a lot of room for things not to match, and that's why you have to spend a lot of energy and effort because to find the right match, because it's a delicate combination, like it's a and then after that, so be it, you live with the consequences of like things changing, right? Like of course you get into a relationship, and because of the specific situation at that point in time, but also because you think there is a buffer, there is room, given the personality traits, for things to be kept that way in the future, even if they are, because they're not only intrinsic of the relationship, sometimes they come from the outside obstacles, right? Like you can have
Yeah,
external obstacles that like put it at risk. But then if the personality traits, if the foundation is there, and the way of thinking and the shared vision is there, then you deal with the externals way better,
yeah.
and internal surprises should be reduced. But then of course if the priorities are high and expectations are high, you have to put a lot of energy. So going back to the apartment example, I think we have a very me and you have a very different um it's very different in our priority list, in the
Hmm.
scale of priorities. And so that's why I spend months looking for it, because for me, like I have a list of things that the apartment has to match for me
Hmm.
to be like, okay, I want this. Because in as a result, the problem is when I actually live in it, if it doesn't match those things, my experience will be affected. For
Hmm.
you, probably, given you don't have the expectations, your experience, it could be one apart. It's not that you don't enjoy a nicer apartment, but it doesn't really raise your satisfaction that much or as much as he would from me.
Yeah,
Does it
no,
make sense?
I don't know, totally. I think that the problem with all of this, and this, I think this is also the problem with Alex's approach, is that he says get your priorities straight before going into a relationship. How is your future partner supposed to to know your priorities if you don't know your own priorities? But sometimes you don't know your own priorities before you've kind of like been in a situation where they matter, right? And
Yeah.
this is kind of the thing. For example, this place, I mean, I can, I'll talk about my own apartment. There's certain things that I don't like about it that I didn't know before. I couldn't know. And those are things that I maybe haven't been confronted with. So I couldn't even know they are priorities because I never had to pick about it. Because so far it wasn't a problem because I've never been in an apartment where it was a problem. So I didn't know it's a problem for me. And same for relationships. Sometimes like your third or fourth relationship uh, is the first time something bothers you because you haven't been confronted with it before.
But then this speaks to don't pick the first apartment because you
No, no,
would.
I disagree because like you can't know without living in the apartment. You don't know the thing. So you can do 1,000 apartment
Okay,
visits
but
and you
then
won't know about the thing without living in it.
it's a definition problem. By picking the first apartment, I'm not saying so. If you're saying going, let's go back to the relationship thing.
Yeah.
If you're saying you need to date to figure things out, completely agree.
No,
Like,
but like what does dating even no, okay, the question is what does dating mean? Because like going on 3 dates won't tell you everything about the person.
no, no, no,
Sometimes you have to
agreed,
yeah,
agreed. But like, let's say that you dating is one thing, picking choosing the partner for life is another, right? So you could argue that like it's like rent to buy in the apartment, right? You could
sure.
rent the apartment, live in the apartment, and then decide, do I want to buy this apartment or not,
Yeah.
right? The situation in a relationship is the same thing, right? Like you can date, properly date, like
Hmm.
in a relationship or
Yeah.
being in a relationship,
Yeah.
but then from that to deciding like this is the partner for life, there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
And so you have a way to like figure out if there, but then you can't figure it all out in advance because again you could one day you could decide because you've dated the person or multiple people, and so you have reference points for the good and the bad, and then you decide, okay, this is the person I want to be with for my life with, spend my life with, and then some things come up after
Yeah.
that you didn't experience before.
Yeah.
So you this is a constant race, you will never know. But then I think I follow Ormozi idea of like if the foundation is there in terms of like approach to life, we can
Hmm.
summarize
Hmm.
into it, then that's less of a problem. It could still be a problem. Why? Because people, I believe people change. I don't think people don't. I think people change because experiences make them change.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think probably, but I'm not sure because I haven't been there yet. If you age, the more you age, the less you change because
Probably.
experiences affect you in a different way.
Yeah, because there's more behind you than there's in front of you.
Yeah, and
Also,
also
your brain is less plastic.
right.
Like,
I think there's a combination of like you've seen like the more things you've seen before, the less they affect you. Like the first time you try a food is like, whoa, what is this? Never try. The thousand time is different, right? So it's the same thing. Like a lot of things you've already experienced, and so they don't affect you the same way.
yeah,
Other things you probably experience for the first time, but you are different, and you're less prone to like be affected.
yeah,
Or so I think if that's the case, uh, I think I lost the train of thought there. but but yeah, so like going back to the idea of you rent like you start a relationship, you figure out then if the approach to life is there, and you decide you decide, okay, this is the person I want to spend my life with. Things can again change in a way that you don't expect, and then so be it. I
yeah.
don't think you can ever like if that doesn't make you choose, you're making a mistake because I agree that there's still like a window when you have to make the choice.
Hmm.
Otherwise you risk ending up
Not
alone.
getting anything. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
that's for sure. But I think the misconception, general misconception is that the window is shorter, like is actually wider than people think it is, and also there are more choices than people think there are. The
yeah.
problem is, I think, misunderstand like is a
The scarcity
misconception.
mindset.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
also seeing options where they really are not real options, but they are shiny, um, like apparent. I don't have the word for it. Like they're like, yeah,
Like,
fake options, basically. I
yeah,
don't know.
but like, can you give an example of that?
Yeah, like in relationship is like you meet people, but you don't meet them like deep enough initially, like, and you make a judgment based on the little you know. And of course people tend to like, it's like the
Like
Instagram
a
thing.
siren, like the siren, or the
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's a kind, yeah, like
Like
of
they
course
lure you in with their singing, but
they show you
they're
their best
they're
self,
just a
and the best
trap.
self
Yeah,
is not their self, right?
yeah,
And then like if you just focus on that, you think, wow, it's again, you project that, and that becomes the idealization of things that are not real, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then yeah, so
Or
that's
Instagram posts of other people, and you're like, oh my god, everyone else is so beautiful, but it's all fake.
yeah, and exactly. And in a way, like, time is what it is. You have to make your best choice with the time you have, and
Yeah,
then there are other things you also want to
yeah.
focus in your life.
But
So
but
this
let me ask you, like, back to
mm,
this psychological component of the the paradoxon of choice that we talked about before. Let's say you lived in a world where you could never see a second apartment, which is kind of the world of dating that we used to have, right? You get married to the first person and you can never try out another relationship.
mhm.
What give me an example of something that is a priority in your apartment, like something that is super important to you when you look for an apartment?
The view.
Okay, the view. Like what do you want to see, for example?
Something that is like appealing to my eyes, like if that really affects my mood.
Okay,
If
so
what I see out of, yeah.
let's say the entire planet was a desert and every view from every apartment is the same. Would it still bother you? It can't, because there's no other options. You have to be okay with it, only seeing the desert, because there's nothing else.
mm, you mean like everything is the same, like
Yeah, because
from
like
wherever you see the same, yeah, it
the
would.
problem, I mean, the problem of being unhappy with the view is that you know there's better views, right? If
For sure,
Yeah,
that
so
for sure.
if you knew that every apartment has the same exact view, it wouldn't affect you.
But it is not real what you're saying. It's a word that is not real. The
No, no,
word is made
but
of
it
differences.
can be if you never look at a second apartment, then it doesn't affect you because you never looked at a second apartment. If you take the first place,
Yes,
then the
but
view is what it is, and you never know you could have had a better view.
then so the idea that you're mentioning here is complete lack of alternatives,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
So
it
what?
either real or not real, but like, does it matter
No,
for
no,
you?
no. Okay, but let's stay in that scenario. Okay, you have a scenario where there's a complete lack of alternative, meaning like it's not really that. It's like complete ignorance of the existence of alternatives, right? Because
Exactly.
there
Yeah.
might be, but you don't know. Now, let me think through it, right?
The
So
question really is the view really making you unhappy, or knowing there's a better one, is that making you unhappy?
it's
Can you
the
be unhappy
it's
with
the
yeah?
experience, previous experience of a better view.
So it is the comparison, the problem.
Compare, but not on like, yeah, it is definitely the component of like knowing that's possible, of course, because if you don't notice something, right,
Exactly, but
like,
that's the point, right? If every woman in the world looked exactly the same, could be the case, right? We live in a world where
yeah,
every woman is genetically identical. You wouldn't care about physical things because everyone looks the same.
yeah, but again, is it a scenario like, then it wouldn't be a like, I could argue it wouldn't be a priority because it everything is the
No, no, of
same.
course, it's just an argument for picking the first best thing. Just
Yeah,
like
but
yeah,
we can't pick an argument partially, right? Like, the point, if we go back to the idea that like, priority is made of expectations. Why, like, let's think a second about expectation. Like, why do we have expectations? Because it's all that's the source, that's the seed, right?
yeah,
Expectation makes it a priority. Why?
yeah, yeah,
Why do you have expectation? You have expectations because you know what's possible,
yeah,
and you want something in a scale of what's possible, ideally depending on like how much you care about the thing, the best or not, right? Like, if you let me think about a thing that's not really like cars. Cars for me, no expectations. Like
Yeah,
I honestly, it's not that I don't like them, so it's in the middle ground. But like
yeah,
I don't own one.
yeah,
I don't plan on owning one. I'm actually trying not to, and for many reasons. And like if you give me a car, yes, there is a like a lower standard, like there's a standard minimum standard, but like from that to like amazing, or I wouldn't, it wouldn't really affect my satisfaction like too much. Okay, so that's a situation where I know what's possible, because I know like there are way better car, less better, like there's a scale of like good and worse, better and worse cars, right? But then whatever I choose, it's not going to affect me that much. A bit, yes, but not that much, right?
mhm,
So I wouldn't put effort into like getting one more than another one if they're not like that far from each other, right?
yeah.
So that's a situation where so the I think the remedy is not like not knowing, right? It's just like following. It comes from somewhere else. So I'm thinking about while we speak, right? Where is it coming from? Why? I don't know if I will ever get to the answer, but like, why for cars I don't have that much of an expectation, and for apartments I do. I don't know. I don't think it's a place
I
where
mean,
to figure that out.
I think one thing is that you've seen more apartments than you have used cars, or you've lived in more places than you've used cars.
I don't think that's the case.
I mean,
I've
so
used.
an example I
Yeah.
can think about is, and this is actually something that happens, I think, to a lot of people that I like you and me that move around a lot. If you, let's say you come, I mean, we both come from a larger city, so it's not exactly the same, but let's say you grow up in a town, in a small town, where there's like very few options of everything, few options of apartments, few options of partners, few options of restaurants, few options of whatever, right? Because it's a small town, there's fewer options. And then you move to, say, New York, which is a huge city. There's a lot of restaurant options, there's a lot of dating options. And this is actually kind of also what happens to me, because like certain options are limited now that I moved back, including choice of partners, because not because there's like way less people here than there are in
Yeah.
New York, but for example, the selection of ethnicities is much larger in New York, right? So let's say, I come from a very homogeneous place, and everyone looks kind of the same. It's kind of the example I gave before, not like genetically exactly identical, but pretty much, because like you come from some small town in Germany, everyone is white, everyone is blonde, everyone has blue
Mm,
eyes, right?
mm.
And then you move to New York, and then you have like
Yeah.
Asians and South Asians and African Americans and white people and Latinos and so on. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, I really like this ethnicity, and I'm attracted to them physically and personality traits and so on. And then
Yeah.
you move back to your small town in Germany, you're like, this is all boring. I'm not gonna be happy with anything here. And same
But
for apartments.
I don't follow that in a sense. Like I think the example I gave, it's a good example of like you knowing the opportunities, the alternatives doesn't make it a priority by itself, because you could. Does it make sense? Like the car example is, I know of, like I tried different cars. I know them. Uh, um, I had in the past different cars. I don't mind. Like, of course, a little bit I mind, right? But it's not that like it doesn't really affect, and that's why I don't put energy into it, or that much energy. So I think the the remedy is not like, okay, let's remove the experience and the knowledge of alternatives to make sure that like you live a fulfilling satisfaction. No, I think it goes back to like whatever we personally as individual we feel strongly towards, like what is our, I think it goes to it's attached to the identity that one has, like probably, I don't know, I don't have the answer to the why, but like focusing on the the reality of it is that you have to follow your priorities. It's not that like by removing alternatives or you knowing about alternatives you solve the priority problem, because yes, what you're saying is
But
true,
do you
like,
agree that someone who comes from a small town moves to a big city and moves back suddenly will be depressed with the options they have?
but yes, but they will be depressed about like a couple of things, not the 1000 things that are less
But I think
in the small
if
town.
they had never left and never seen the options, for example, they're from a small town and then they discovered they really love Indian food, and
Yeah,
they go back home and there's not a single Indian restaurant, they're gonna be really upset because now they know how much they like Indian food. But
but
if they had never known, they wouldn't be unhappy
right,
about
but then there it was also full of like matcha places, but they don't care about matcha, and they go back and they don't even realize that oh, there are less matcha participants. Who
Sure.
cares?
Yeah, that's for
Does it
sure.
make
But
sense?
like, but if they did notice something they like, it can make them depressed for not having it. Because if they had never learned about it, then it
But
wouldn't.
that's the beauty of life experience. You figure out that there are things and you go towards them. No? Don't you think? Removing the alternatives doesn't make it a more colorful and like
I mean,
interesting life.
sure. I mean, I'm in the same boat as you, as someone who like strives towards the things they like. But you
Hmm.
can argue that the person who never left their little town, let's say there's like two brothers, right? One of them, they're both from the small town. One of them moves to New York and moves back, and he's extreme. And then he never finds someone he likes. He never eats anything he likes anymore because he's seen all the great things that he likes. And the other one is just content with what he has because he's never seen the other things. Don't you think that person that never left potentially is the happier person?
Yes, but then I wouldn't measure life satisfaction based on happiness then.
Sure. I mean, that goes back
because
to the
because
original.
yeah,
Yeah.
everything is about happiness and life satisfaction, because you working towards goals is like probably the most important thing. And being like the being happy as you are thing, it's fantastic, but it's again one aspect, it's not the whole pie. Like one slice of the pie, not the whole pie. Like it's great to have it, it's fantastic, but then what? Like, okay, like you live you're happier, baseline happier because you have fewer choices and you don't know that there are other choices. Fantastic, but then what are you doing?
I mean,
Like,
but it
are
also
you working
it's
towards
about
something?
energy expenditure, right? So if we go back to the example of the two brothers, one of them moves back, and the other one is like happily married. He found his wife when he was 18, and the other one now comes back. He's like 30. He still doesn't have a wife, and so on. And that person that got married at 18 and stayed in the little town, that person has so much free time and energy because they don't have to look for a new partner, that they can like focus on building the best farm in the town, and like having this huge farm, and like being the biggest farmer in town. And the other one is like so depressed that he doesn't have a partner that.
But then you take it as a negative aspect, the search for the right partner, which I don't think, like, you see what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, it
y-
just takes away, it just takes away energy and time that you
I
could
think
focus
it's,
on your
yeah, but
big
I think
goals.
it's the same. Also, creating the best farm would take away energy and time. But why are you seeing? That's more a question for you. Why are you seeing building towards like the best farm as like energy and time well spent because it's a priority for you, for like the hypothetical example we were saying, and building towards like finding the best partner,
I mean,
something that's like drain.
yeah, I
That's
think
I,
I think it's
yeah.
not a, it's not an easy question to answer. I just think that, for example, looking for apartments and finding the right partner, like both of them, like I think you underestimate how important the apartment is to me, but the search stresses me so much that I can't deal with it. Does that make sense? Because I
Yeah.
dislike the process of searching so much that I want to deal with the downsides of the apartment
Okay,
that
but
it's not perfect.
then when you get some like when you, I'm sure like in your experience, at some point you got an apartment and you're like, this is a good one, and you went through the search. uh wasn't it the reward worth it, worth the search or no?
I honestly, so none of the apartments I've ever lived in I super super loved, but like
Okay.
actually, this is the funny thing. The apartment where I was the happiest in my entire life was one where I had no say because it was student housing. It was the apartment I got by the university, and they told me which apartment, everything. I couldn't choose, and it was the best apartment I've ever had. Like, period. Amazing view, like amazing location. But it was because, I mean, I don't know if it was because I got it picked for me, but it just happens
Yeah.
to be.
So, let me try and summarize what we said so far. So the last part, your take seems to be, if you don't have options, it's an easier choice because you don't have choice.
I mean, this is
And
kind of like what the at least the research is saying, right? With the
right.
yeah.
and and ultimately that removing that choice makes you focus on other things and make and removes your any negative side effects of like the process of choosing things, right? The process of like the quest for something, but then and it gives you like it makes you more happy. That's the idea.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of
um
like a general life thing that we've mentioned many times, that uh, expectations are the enemy of happiness, because you always, you're never grateful for the things you have, but always ungrateful for the things you don't have.
yeah, but then what I think is this: you don't choose your expectations, unfortunately, because they come up from a combination of like the way you grew up,
Yeah,
the
yeah, of course.
experiences of
I guess what I'm saying is that you can artificially lower your expectations by not looking at other options.
But then what's the point? Like, I think that's the salt of life. Having expectations and like going towards like trying to fulfill your expectations, it's what makes it fun.
No,
And sometimes not fun. I agree.
I tend to agree mostly. It's just that in the end, we always, you and I, we always think about systems and
Yeah. Yeah.
ways to, also ways to hack our own mind and trick our own minds into, getting what we want, really, right? And maybe I'm just, it's not like I am like that. I am the person that takes forever in deciding. So I'm arguing against something that I'm not actually doing. You know what I
No, no,
mean?
I agree. I agree. And also there are 2 points that connect very much, which are on one end, you give me a second.
I'm kind of my own devil's advocate, right? So I I'm arguing for something I'm not doing, because I am super picky in a lot of things. I'm super picky in my partners. I'm probably less picky in
Yeah.
apartments than you are, because like I hate the apartment search so much, but I get
Yeah.
super unhappy about the things that I don't like about the apartment.
Right, but I think that's it. The problem is the way we experience the process, and I think we talked about it in the past, like the experiencing it as a painful experience, like stressful and painful experiences, because we care, we are like
Yeah,
involved, and we care,
yeah. I
and
think
we
yeah,
would like to control the process. But also the classic example of like if you knew in advance how thing would end up, it wouldn't be that fun anymore. It wouldn't be
yeah. We talked about it the other day. Yeah,
right.
I
It
mean
would
this
remove
is,
your expectation.
no, for sure. I think what's, maybe also you just like the apartment hunt more than me. Same way that someone might like dating, like, dating as in going out on dates with new people much more than they like the relationship. And I think, maybe this is the secret of life: enjoying the process more than
Yeah,
the outcome, right? Because if you really love looking for apartments, then great, like keep looking.
I would argue it's how you deal with the process
Yeah,
exactly, because the process is the thing. I mean, at least that's our take. Fine, and then given that the process is the thing, how do you experience the process makes a huge difference. And
yeah,
I agree with you. Like thinking of it as going back to the choice of your partner, like for life, thinking of that process of like going through emotion, dating different people, trying to figure out, missing out on a potential
yeah,
relationship
yeah,
because you screw up, because you do something that you weren't supposed to do, and you make a mistake. Oh, life is full of those situations,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you make a mistake and you're like, oh gosh, that would, but then the what are your assumptions getting into it, and while you go through it, of like, is it like, is it, do we have one soulmate, and then if that train passes, it's over? Like all these ideas like change your experience of the process.
yeah,
And I think the effort should be on removing all those preconceived notions of like how things actually, because we don't know, right?
yeah,
So it is true that there is a risk. I see the risk. It's like the risk of time passing.
yeah,
There's the risk of like losing opportunities. That's clear. Like
yeah,
it's not, I'm not saying, I'm not arguing for there's no risk, it's
mm,
fine. No, I'm saying the opportunities are more than we think, and there are more options that we think in general, like to tackle situations.
yeah,
And keeping that in mind in when things happen that are like put you into like under stress, thinking maybe there's a way out, or an alternative, I think helps.
Yeah, for sure.
take a breather. But then in general, like, it's trusting the future. I don't know how to say it. Like,
Yeah,
trusting the
yeah. No, no, I
process.
get it. Yeah.
It's hard, but I think that's the thing that changes.
Also, not
So
everyone is in the same position, right? Because like I think there's people that they really, really, really need a place to stay. Otherwise, they like live on the street. It's a different situation than, let's say, you live with
yeah.
your family. They have a nice house, and you can, it's not a big deal if you take 6 months longer to find a place, right? So there is, there's you have to think about these things also. I think in general, I think it's a nice, and this is what we said in the other episode. It's nice to be the person that appreciates the process as much as the outcome or more even, be it the search for a life partner, the search for an apartment, building the best company. Because like if the goal is to have a $1 billion company but you don't like getting there, then what are you doing, right? And I think
Yeah.
this is kind of the same thing. But you have to look at what is the what happens if you don't make a decision. And if the outcome could be living on the street, that's different than you just sleep in your mom's apartment for a couple of months more, which no.
No, but I would take it as like, you know, not finding the not finding a partner as a profound effect, right? Like on you as a person. Like, I think, I mean, personally, like, the way what I experience is like being single. The experience of being single changes as you age,
For
for
sure.
sure,
Yeah.
and
But
also,
also why? Because the opportunity cost gets higher and higher, right? Because the opportunity window gets smaller and smaller. Because you age, you feel more pressure because the
that
market is
could be a portion of it, but I
yeah.
think another portion is like the your needs change, and like you could, like, it's also related, I think, to like friendships. Like, when you're younger, you tend to spend a ton of time with your friends and your family, right? I mean, again, I'm generalizing, but ideally, like, you ideally you spend time with your family, and ideally you have friends and you spend time with your friends.
Yeah.
Some might spend a ton of time with their friends and none with their
Yeah.
family, of course. But the point is, like, that's kind of like a situation. So you spend time with other people
Hmm.
anyway. Also, there are a lot of, like, you go to school ideally, and so like you spend a lot of time at school with other people, and that's where you make friends. There are more opportunities to make friends. The more you age, the fewer opportunities to make friends you have,
Hmm.
I think. And to interact with people, you probably, depending on what you do, you probably have. But like, interacting with people and like having like meaningful interactions are different things. And then, so I think your needs change, and I think it's probably also, I don't know, but intrinsic to like the way it's biological,
Hmm.
so that like we tend to like look more for a partner. It's not only like a society pressure, which is a portion of it, but is also, I think, something like biological, and so there's a drive from
Yeah.
within, I think. And so, like, not having a person to experience life with at some point becomes like, a problem, I think.
Hmm.
And or can become a problem. And then again, there are people that are like outliers on that, but like, it can become a problem. And so I think that could cause more stress, because of that, right? For sure. But mm,
But again, I think in a society where marriage wasn't a thing, maybe like it's a society where no one ever has sex and no one ever has a partner, then you wouldn't be upset about it because no one else has the thing that you think you want. I mean, I don't know. It's like I think the
I think
societal.
sex is such a biological
I
drive
mean,
and
I'm
need
just yeah.
that.
It's a
Yeah,
fantastic word that doesn't
yeah,
exist, but
yeah.
I mean, I think the societal aspect is much larger than we think because I mean, you can kind of look at it, you know, you can look at the data because like people used to uh, get children when they were teenagers, right? And now it's like people get children in their 30s. So clearly, society has changed enough that people in their 20s think, oh, I have time to make this decision about having children and so on. There's so many people that are like 25 or 29 or whatever, and they're like, oh, I have time to make this decision. And like if you asked a 25-year-old in the 1500s about like having children, they'd be like, oh, I'm super late, you know.
Yeah, but because it basically used to change faster your level of interaction with other people. You know, when you start a family, you are very much you tend to be very much focused on your family than on to the other interactions you have. It's normal, I think.
Yeah, I just think that back in the day, everyone was married off at 18 or 20 or so, and then if you're not married at 25, you probably think like it's too late now because
I
everyone's
think it's a
married.
lot related to kids. Like we now tend to have like fewer kids and later in
Yeah,
life,
exactly.
and so that's push because when you have kids, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of my friends that are having kids these days, and of course they get focused on their family because
Yeah, of
there's
course.
a ton to take care of,
Yeah,
and so like that already changes the landscape because then you have fewer. So it is true there is an influence of the people around you because if nobody is in a relationship, you don't feel that kind of pressure. I agree,
yeah,
but
yeah.
still
You
a
feel the
portion
pressure
does.
from the comparison to these people, but also
I
because
don't think it's just a comparison. I
no,
think
no,
it's
it's
the
also because
experience of.
the market gets smaller and smaller because all
I
these.
think it's also the daily day to day. Like if you let's say you want to book a trip for holidays,
Yeah,
and your friends are all single and you're single,
it's
let's book a
easy to
trip.
find
Let's go.
someone to do it with. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. I have a friend. I talked to a friend recently who left Italy
Mm-hmm,
and lives in Asia,
mm-hmm.
and he mentioned like he said, yes, I still have some very close friends in Italy, but I'm not going there lately at
Yeah,
all, and I'm not planning to because they have their own lives.
yeah,
And so what I'm gonna do, like my life now is here. What I'm gonna do, I go there and I wait for them to have a free hour in the day, you know.
yeah,
He's lucky that he doesn't have to work during the day that
yeah,
much, uh, and yeah, that's true. And when I was listening to him, I was like, that is actually true. Like if your environment that you were used to like changes, like that makes you pushes you to change more than any other like
yeah. For
pressure.
sure, for
Like
sure.
yeah. So I think there's that, and I think there's also we changes like when we age, we tend to like want more like not deeper relationship because we that's not the case, but like to build a relationship. I think it's natural. I think it's not something that somebody invented and is like, now we have to be monogamous or and build a family. No, I think it's something that biologically we tend to go for, and in general, and yeah. So overall, the going back to the that if we try to go back to the concept of like finding the one, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say? Like I would say taking the practical approach of Hormozi, I think it makes a ton of sense. Yes, it might remove a bit of like the magic and the poetry, but the magic and the poetry are to me are like a good way to hide problems. Like the when you deal with other people, like when you have to do with other like interact with other people and experience life with others, you need to have systems in place to understand, communicate properly, and that's not something magic, right? Like that's something that you
Yeah,
learn from experience, and then you have to um, tune with tune in with the other person,
yeah.
for sure.
I think the media and so on, they're not doing us a favor by kind of giving this image of the magical fairy tale love, the
Yeah,
one, right? We think
yeah,
there's like the one and the universe will bring us to them. I think like obviously the practical approach to me at least makes more sense. I think like the main thing he's saying is that, and I think we all, at least people who have who have been in relationships, know that you have to compromise. There's always compromises to make. And I think his main point is that you should front load all the effort. So instead of finding, quickly deciding to get into a relationship and then making it work, and making a lot of compromises and trying to change for the person, or making the person change for you, instead you should front load the effort and like look a little bit longer to find someone where the effort of compromising isn't so big.
yeah,
I think my main criticism of this is that, I mean, a couple of things. There's like, one, you don't have infinite time, right? To date around. Two is that I think he maybe underestimates uh, the clarity of your own priorities, that you, because you don't know yourself, super super well when you get into a relationship. Sometimes it depends on your age and everything, right? But like you have to also
Mm.
you have to learn what you care about. And three is like, I think he also underestimates the likelihood of change in you or your partner. And he's been, I actually looked it up while we were talking, he's been married for 7 years, which is good.
Mm.
But he can't really speak with the same experience as someone who's been married for 20, 30 years, and a lot of marriages fall apart. And maybe, maybe he's got it all figured out. But he said, for example, the example he gave was, if Layla gained, like, I don't know what he said, like 100 pounds or something, would
Yeah.
he break up with her? He says, like, depends on the reason, but if it's just letting herself go, probably. If it's a medical issue, probably not. But because then she changed her character so much that it's not a person he wants to be with anymore. But people change, and maybe he's a little bit naive as to how much people can change over time, because I surely changed to hell since
Mm.
the last
Yeah.
10 years. So who
That I
knows?
agree totally.
Yeah, so you can't know everything up front. I think it makes sense to front load some of the stuff. And it goes back to the apartment head. Like, if you have some things that are priorities and they're non-negotiables right now, which might still change, by the way. But like, if you have like two or three non-negotiables, put them on the table as quickly as possible, right?
Yeah.
So like, if be it at the apartment hunt or at the dating scene and so on, instead of trying to hide your flaws or like your non-negotiables, like, the best example is like wanting to have children, which also changes in people change their mind about wanting to have children. But
Hmm.
if right now you think that it's something that you will never change your mind about, you should tell them on the first date. Kind of, that's kind of his approach. Say to them right now, hey, this is something I can't live without. If it's if we conflict in this one, even if everything else matches, then let's move on, kind of. But
Yeah.
yeah.
One point on that, on the 100-pound thing, like when I heard of it, like I see your point, but again, it's too practical in a way. Like it's something. What I don't like about it is that it's basically dismissing a part of like being with someone, which is also and it connects to your point of like people change, and I agree, and priorities change,
Yeah.
yours change,
Yeah.
and the other person change, and if yours change and the other person has to put up with your priority changes, or your behaviors change, because priority is fine, is all on paper, but like your behaviors change.
Hmm.
And I see that in people like around me as well, like when people change their behaviors,
Yeah.
and then if they have to put up with yours, you have to put up with theirs.
Yeah.
And the idea that like, oh, the behavior changed and it was tied to like a very important priority for me,
Hmm.
okay, then screw it, whatever, leave it. Like that's again giving up on like trying to find a compromise. And again, if if the match is like changes, like if the things that made you match change so drastically all at once, or right, then I understand, like, you don't have to stay with someone
Hmm.
because you got together in the first place,
Hmm.
right? But then one change, it can't be, it can be the source, like even as deep as that, like his connection of like, oh, she gains 100 pound because she's not taking care of herself, then I drop it. It's too quick of a reason, I think,
I mean,
right?
he also says he knows it's not going to happen because he knows her so well that he knows it will never
Yeah,
happen.
but then
No,
that's
no, of
it.
course. But I think like I think what he's leaving out, and he kind of, it is naive in some way, because like, he's leaving out some stuff, and he actually says it himself, because like, once you're in a relationship, you you your personality changes are not independent of each other anymore, because you change
Yeah.
together, because you spend so much time with each other. And he
Mhm.
did say, when they first got into a relationship, he said well, first of all, he said, I don't want anything serious, and then it became serious. And the other thing he said is that my job is my priority and my relationship comes next. And she said the same. And then because they got together, they both agreed to change it to relationship comes first and job comes after.
Yeah.
And the reason presumably is that they both changed in the same direction because they spent so much time with each other. So one of the things is that if you do make the commitment to stay with that person, probably you're going to change, but also more likely than not, your priorities are going to change, in sync, maybe, or at least the changes are going to be correlated. And but I think like the important thing is that this is kind of like the, you know, the marketing funnel, or like the YouTube thumbnail kind of thing. No one's going to watch the video if they don't like the thumbnail, right? And you, to make it work in 10 years, you have to make it work right now. If right now doesn't work,
Right.
then 10 years it's not going to work for sure. So you have to like what you see now. So it does make sense to use your current priorities to find your partner, because you need to get through the first year to be able to get through the 10th, because you
Also, they're not gonna all change, right? Like
exactly.
there's gonna be changes, but
Yeah.
and also
But
some changes
you
are
can't
gonna be
optimize for 10 years from now if you're not going to make the
right.
first
You
year.
can't,
Yeah.
and it's not the point. And also, like some changes will be temporary, right? There's also that.
Yeah.
Like yes, there's fluctuation. Everyone goes through periods of their life, phases, and and if you choose a person, you choose the person. No, it's not no matter what, but you choose a person because the fundamentals are there. And even though there are situations like that's also what his example, right? Like maybe she gains 100 pounds, but it's the same way she gained them, she could lose them potentially not. But the point is, right, like there's the there's maybe a period that like of time where things get tough and
Sure.
you don't do the
I
things
think he
that
acknowledges that the reason is important, because like I think his scenario was he doesn't change at all. His priorities stay exactly the same, but she completely changes her personality and suddenly doesn't care about her body anymore, which is super unlikely, right?
yeah.
It's just
So
super
yeah,
unlikely.
so in general, the closure on this that I would add is what I was saying initially, that of like it is what it like at some point you kind of you do your best, and then even if you optimize for best, you might not reach the best that you think in your quest of anything. And specifically like in finding the one, is not that like you settle. It's not about settling, because that's wrong. It's about like finding the great match and then stopping, because if you don't stop there, the and then you deal with whatever comes. It's like you sail, and then whatever is the storm that comes, you deal with it because you made the decision,
Yeah.
right? Because you chose the route, and that's it. And then you go with it and you deal with it, unless like it's really like it brings you to like to your knees really, then it's different. And I think that kind of like staying with the struggle and learning to like not being distracted by the novelty or by like something that is most likely is like it appears something but it is not it is not like that staying with the struggle, it's actually again part of like the process, and making it not enjoyable necessarily. Sometimes you can't enjoy situations, but like um, making that part of the struggle, like acknowledging that the part of the struggle is part of like the experience itself, and you need it because you then experience, you then appreciate the positive experiences. It is what you have to follow. And so it's like don't over optimize, because you risk, that's a situation where you like you risk never putting an end to it. Does it make sense?
Yeah. I think the, you know, there's no satisfying conclusion to this discussion, because
Mhm.
and this is something he acknowledges also, right? He says there is no objective metric or measure of relationship success. It's not like, you know, revenue for a company. There is no number. There's no like, I mean, you can measure how long they've been together without getting divorced. That doesn't mean it's a successful relationship.
Yeah,
They can
yeah.
be miserable, and you, and also you only see what they present to the outside. So it's really hard to judge the success of a relationship. So it's really hard to find the optimal answer.
Right, but that's, I think that ties back to the idea of like, given you don't know like how others experience their relationships, you don't have a frame of comparison, so you just deal with yours.
Yeah, yeah,
It's freeing in a way, right? Like
yeah,
it
for
is
sure.
freeing. You don't know. It's useless to think about that. Like think about yours. Think about making it sustainable and like solid and fulfilling for you, and then you're in good shape. Who cares?
Yeah,
Like you're never gonna figure out.
yeah, that's true. It's like the meditation. You only have now. You only have your
Yeah,
current
you
surroundings.
deal with your stuff. I think
Exactly.
that's yeah. Like and I think that it's easy to fall into the trap of like, oh, that relationship looks better. What do you know?